Red Bull have essentially eternally boned themselves for the coming F1 season. From firing Liam Lawson to their team principal swallowing co-workers, this team sucks right now. And the true reason will probably surprise you. But let's be honest, every team on the grid has its issues. Ferrari likes to send their drivers to therapy, Alpine is French, Aston Martin would profit better as a farming company, but for Red Bull, it's a dumpster fire. A fast one for sure, but man, the HR department for this team must be working overtime because by God, this team collects controversies as fast as they do trophies. Now, let's talk about Liam Lawson specifically, whose awfully mismanaged career has been put on blast in front of the entire motorsport world. In 2023, Lawson made his debut in Formula 1 when he subbed in for Daddy Ricciardo, who had broken his hand on the Friday practice. With almost no preparation at all, Liam qualified 20th but outscored the other AlphaTauri on grid during the actual race, which is kind of like putting a toddler behind the wheel and then the toddler somehow knows how the transmission works. So everyone thought this was the up and coming Tom for Red Bull pipeline. But fast forward to this season and he's given a shot in a Red Bull seat until shortly after he was kicked out of the team harder than I was kicked out of your mom's house after asking if her sister was single. But Red Bull's reason? Oh, you know, he wasn't fast enough for us. Like, bro, it's 2 races. The same team who gave Nick De Vries 10 whole races to cosplay as a confused rental car driver, but Lawson gets 2 weekends before you decide he's mentally unfit? Christian Horner literally said the engineers were concerned about his mental state. What mental state? You gave him the job and told him it was also his fault the coffee machine was broken. Even Max said he didn't approve of Lawson getting dropped off the team so soon. But when you think it can't get worse, this man was literally told through social media. And meanwhile, Yuki Tsunoda, Red Bull's favorite anime protagonist with angry issues, is pushed forward as a candidate to replace Lawson, which makes more sense given that Tsunoda has also been with AlphaTauri for a couple of years, but it's hard to compare if he's really better than Lawson because whenever a second driver joins Red Bull, it's kind of like an atomic bomb versus a coughing baby situation, because all the drivers dwarf in comparison to Max. And sure, Tsunoda being promoted makes some surface level sense if you're doing the team's management decisions by throwing darts at an inflatable dartboard. He's got more experience, he's passionate, screams like the brake pedal insulted his ancestors, but if you look at the results, the difference between Yuki and Lawson isn't actually that massive, and especially since Lawson was giving almost no time to prove himself. And let's not also forget how weird this whole situation was. The switch happened right before the Japanese Grand Prix, so it's pretty easy to understand what's going on here. That's not favoritism, that's corporate cosplay. And look, Yuki's done fine, decent pace, few less tantrums, has stopped calling the car a piece of shit on live radio every lap. But decent isn't enough when you're filling a seat that could have been held by Sergio Perez, the Minister of Defense and now Minister for crashing every race. And all of this chaos has consequences. Red Bull's driver lineup is now somewhat more unstable than Ferrari's pit strategy. The team is so busy juggling internal politics, angry Kiwis, and a screaming Honda intern, and they've kind of realized, oh wait, we fucked this constructor's title. Oops. Better give Max a jetpack and hope for the best. However, these deeply confusing personnel decisions and driver swaps have made it so that now, as we're coming up into the second quarter of the season, and Red Bull has already given up any chance at Constructors' Championship, instead, they are now focusing solely on Max by himself to secure his 5th title. But in order to understand how this situation of Red Bull is today, we kind of need to look back as well to understand where we all started to go wrong. Because in 2023, you could best describe it as Red Bull's dictatorship speedrun, which makes sense for an Austrian team. The team collectively won 22 out of 23 races, which is the same level of dominance you'd see if you dropped me into a kindergarten with a baseball bat. The only thing that managed to stop them from winning all races was an angry Spaniard, who would later be rewarded with a promotion to Williams. Max Verstappen especially was so ahead of the rest of the field, he could make a pit stop, get out for a wank, flip off Perez, and still win the race. So nobody could keep up. Mercedes and Ferrari cosplayed as midfield teams, and McLaren spent the first half of the season speedrunning irrelevance, and completely forgot how to make a car. But this is where it gets a little crazy, because roll back to 2021, and Red Bull had minorly overspent their budget, for which they were fined $7 million and were given a 10% reduction in aero testing in 2022. And despite these punishments, Red Bull somehow dominated eliminated the following season. So as Verstappen scorched the earth in pretty much every race, the teams wondered what steroids Adrian Newey was putting in the car, especially despite the reduced testing time. Newey essentially created a jet engine on wheels, even leading Lewis Hamilton to publicly criticize them and the team, saying there will be people that will probably go for it again, and no, they're just going to get a slap on the wrist. Adrian Newey, for the people that don't understand, was the head race engineer and the car designer behind the monster of a car that drove in 2023. And I say was because he left the team at the beginning of 2024 for Aston Martin. Of all teams, Aston Martin. Now, it's speculated that Newey left because of changes in management that he didn't align with, but despite his reasons, it's clear that Red Bull's fucked. Speaking of departures, let's talk about the biggest scandal Red Bull couldn't drive away from, and that is Christian Horner's WhatsApp cheating saga. That's right, the man who micromanages every last bolt on the F1 car somehow thought he could be subtle while sexting a junior employee on company time through work channels, while married to one of the Spice Girls. You think he was creating a Drive to Survive drama on purpose. And not saying that I watch Drive to Survive, just want to clarify that for all the people that are going to comment on this video. I know, I don't. Now, you'd think in a normal company, this would result in a quiet resignation. A quick statement, maybe a LinkedIn update that says stepping away to pursue new opportunities. But this is Red Bull. Instead of stepping down, Horner pulled out,
I did not have sexual relations with that woman,
denied everything, released a suspiciously clean investigation report conducted by a PI, and smiled smugly on a pit wall like nothing happened. Meanwhile, his wife was probably Googling how to divorce a team principal because she later admitted that despite putting on a brave face in public, she was struggling. Now, it all came to boiling point when Max's permanently angry dad, Jos Verstappen, told the media things were exploding in the team if he stayed in the position. So if this wasn't your sign that Red Bull is just a slow-moving HR disaster with front wings, buckle up, because we're only getting started here. See, the thing is with Red Bull is they're fast on track, but they're faster at collapsing from the inside. The team has become a prime example of how to not run a racing team. The cars started failing, the testing got rushed, the simulation tools still run on Windows XP, and half the staff look like they're one pit stop away from burning out. And looming above all of this chaos is their team advisor Helmut Marko, a man who speaks with the subtlety of a jackhammer and a political awareness of a cinder block. The problem with Helmut Marko is that he is Red Bull's team advisor, but he is not actually a part of the company of Red Bull. He's really just your grandpa with paddock access. He'll hang around and say some occasionally wise things, but usually he will be just saying, oh, the good old days, and proceed to glaze the 1850s before slavery was abolished. Now, Helmut Marko isn't just a grumpy old dickhead that hangs around in a paddock all day. I know, I just said he is, but he is one of the core reasons why Red Bull not only has driving simulations, but also anxiety simulations, because he has a habit of openly berating drivers, and especially in Formula 1, a sport where everything is picked up by the media. So whatever Helmut says is not going to stay in the garage. He tried to publicly diagnose Checo Perez's race pace as it fell off during the 2024 season. We know you got a doctorate, Helmut, but you clearly need one in your PR as well. So when Checo started underperforming and was admittedly not doing so great, instead of Red Bull offering our boy some much needed support in the shadow, Helmut Marko got on Austrian TV and went, he's South American, he's just not as focused as Max. Now, this wasn't just tone deaf, but was just comically racist. And of course, Red Bull's reaction to this was a strong, resounding PR delay. It took them days for them to even mildly apologize, which is where the issue of Helmut not being part of this company actually came in. Red Bull couldn't give him much but a gentle slap on the wrist, and Perez definitely deserved better than to receive prejudicial remarks from a man old enough to remember the dinosaurs. Now, I'm really hoping off book that Perez gets brought into Cadillac this coming year, because one, it would just make sense, and two, he's just too good to just leave in like a really poor situation. So praying on the announcement soon, but we'll have to see, guys. But getting back on track, Red Bull finally started slipping when Adrian Newey, the design god, and the man who practically reverse engineered gravity to make Max go faster, decided to jump ship. And when Newey left, so did the competitive edge. Red Bull started flailing harder than Ferrari during a tire strategy, their setups fell apart. Suddenly, Max was fighting Oscar Piastri on merit, which is like having a retired athlete 1v1 against a teenager on steroids. But apparently, losing Newey wasn't enough. Red Bull also managed to scare off their longtime race director, Jonathan Wheatley. The guy who literally ran race ops left, and not to another team, he joined Sauber, a team so mid their highlight reel is mostly pit stops that didn't suck. And when Wheatley left, he reportedly told people that Sauber was a healthier work environment. Boy, if you don't imagine being so dysfunctional that Sauber is a vacation. That's like quitting Google to join a fax machine repair shop. because the vibes are better. Red Bull are shit, and you cannot make this up. Now, speaking of the people who seem to have a horrible time at Red Bull, let's get into the darkest pit of Red Bull's soul, the cursed lineage of their second driver, aka the Grim Reaper in second position to Max. A second driver, broadly defined, is a supportive driver to the first driver, who helps with strategy, helps score points for the team, and in general, just scores less points than the first driver, but is still of use to the team. These positions are not predetermined, but are formed as the season progresses. I'm looking at you, McLaren. This is the era of Lando, Norris, But being the second driver in Red Bull, you're more like an emotional punching bag than anything else, because every element of the car is tailored to Max. The steering, the braking, the balance, the tires. It's like you're trying to play Guitar Hero on Expert and the console only responds to Max's fingerprints. The team's general mentality seems to shove aside the second driver harder than Alpine. Even the pit crew moves slower for second drivers, and if Max gets a 1.9 second stop, the other guy gets a coffee break and a tire rotation from 2016. Now take a look at Daddy Ricciardo, who was shoved aside for a lack of consistency according to Christian Horner. With Max and Daniel consistently butting heads, Daniel's frustration made it clear that he was fighting to keep his seat, and that he was under a lot of pressure from Red Bull. Daniel decided to escape purgatory when he switched to Renault in 2019, and the vacancy was taken up by Pierre Gasly. He was given a whopping 12 races to prove himself, but obviously Red Bull deemed his performance unworthy, despite consistently being in the points, and booted him back to his sister team Toro Rosso. Now, driving for Red Bull's sister team Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, or Racing Bulls, or whatever stupid name it is these days, at this point it's less of a Formula 1 team and more of a tax evasion tactic. Like Pierre Gasly being sent to the second seat at Red Bull is like a demotion. So logically speaking, if you're booted back to the sister team, it's a promotion. So Gasly went on to show the biggest middle finger to Red Bull when he won the first race in 2020, kind of proving that Red Bull took drivers with potential and then proceeded to squeeze the potential right out. So let's recap the casualty list. Daniel Ricciardo, smiling Aussie icon, 7-time race winner, fan favorite, got shoved out for inconsistencies, aka not being Max. Pierre Gasly, promoted to Red Bull seat with barely half a season to prep, got dumped back to Toro Rosso after 12 races, despite scoring points. Now, if you thought the Red Bull disaster piece was done claiming victims, jokes aside, because the Predator's eyes were set on a new young driver to traumatize Alex Albon. Also, the Predator eyes, I'm not talking about Christian Horner here, unfortunately, because Alex Albon, who similarly to Gasly drove for Toro Rosso, came from the junior Red Bull team, decided that he wanted to become a glorified Hunger Games, where you secure your seat with a PowerPoint explaining why you deserve the FP1 session. Because Alex Albon joined Red Bull halfway through the season, had about 3 decent weekends, and was expected to somehow match Verstappen in a car that handled like a wet bar of soap dropped in a prison shower. Crazily enough, but likely because of COVID issues, Albon was allowed to stay for 2020, got outclassed eventually, and was promptly booted to Red Bull Gulag, aka simulator duty, where he clawed his way back to F1 with Williams because Red Bull refused to build careers, they like to break them in front wings like Monaco. So let's talk about Perez, a name you probably remember from earlier for crashing quite a lot. After a promising start with the team, Checo quickly went from Minister of Defense to Minister of Disappointment. So let's rewind to 2021. Checo finally got his big break. After a career of dragging midfield cars to podiums like the man was pulling a couch up a flight of stairs alone, the guy who basically saved Racing Point from becoming a tax write-off, he finally got a shot at Red Bull. This is the same man who went from dead last to first in 2020 Sakir Grand Prix after being yeeted out of a turn like a piñata. It's the kind of race you win in a video game and not in an actual real life race. So naturally, Red Bull saw that and thought, let's hand this guy a seat and a BetterHelp subscription as well, because the situation at Red Bull hadn't improved at all. See, when Checo joined Red Bull, he wasn't stepping into a team, he was stepping into Max Verstappen's shadow. Because joining Red Bull as a second driver isn't like joining a team, it's like joining a cult where you're not allowed to speak unless spoken to, and all prayers must be directed towards Helmut Marko. Red Bull doesn't build two equal cars, they build one car and tailor to the exact driving style of Max Verstappen to feed his god complex, and the other car is like the neglected twin, is duct taped together by interns who failed out of engineering school, and Max likes a very specific car setup, so when the garage demands all of the specific attention, Checo's garage is scrambling to find a shopping cart and a duct tape with a V6 engine to it. In 2021, Checo took one for the team and solidified his title as the Minister of Defense. He blocked Hamilton and pulled a generational team play in Abu Dhabi, ensuring that Max could catch up to Hamilton to take the championship fight to him. The Orange Army loved him, the team hailed him, and the fans called him a legend. But in 2022, his glow faded and cracks started showing. Max was soloing the entire grid, but Checo was fighting with Alonso in the Ghost of Ferrari strategy for 5th place. Red Bull, of course, didn't help. They just hit him with the "we need you to perform better," while throwing him on ancient tire strategies and pit stops that looked like an interpretive dance. And then 2023 hit, and Max activated God mode. Checo had a decent start, picked up a couple of early wins, and rumors of a championship fight spread. But Checo fans had to cope for the rest rest of the season as his confidence got stomped, flattered in a budget airline sandwich, and by mid-season he was qualifying outside of the top 10 in one of the fastest car on the grid, while Max could do yoga stretches during Q3 as pole was basically confirmed for him. Red Bull's solution: public shaming him and having Helmut Marko make some questionable comments about his ethnicity on national TV. Great support system, guys, really building team morale here. Anyway, Checo apologized for not being Max, Helmut didn't apologize for anything, Red Bull mumbled some pure non-apology, and we all moved on like nothing happened, except Checo, who was still stuck in the psychological gulag which is Red Bull racing. By 2024, Checo was basically just moving a DRS zone for Max. Every weekend the media would ask if he was getting dropped, and every weekend Red Bull gave the pure equivalent of "we'll see." This is what it's like to be a second driver at Red Bull. Your job is to help Max win, smile in interviews, and forget slowly that your self-worth is there. Red Bull loves to act like Checo's failure is Checo's fault, but let's be honest, if you take a world-class driver, give him a car that's allergic to his style, and pair him with a team that's more loyal to Max than Max is to his own facial hair. Before the end of this video, I just wanted to discuss the Spanish Grand Prix situation, which just made things even worse for Red Bull. Max was in the runnings for a podium finish in this race and then pulled a card from Osama bin Russell's book and crashed right into the side of him. And all of this was caused by Red Bull's horrible team strategy. Who would have guessed, huh? Who would have fucking guessed? Now, for the rest of the season, I'm curious to see what mental war crimes Red Bull is going to bring on Yuki Tsunoda going forward, especially with their dominance now being challenged by McLaren. But hey, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and click the video on the screen. You'll like it. You'll like it. Go on, do it. Do it.